Anna Wolfe, a native of Tacoma, Washington, is an investigative reporter who writes about poverty and economic justice. Before joining the staff at Mississippi Today in September of 2018, she worked at the Clarion Ledger for 3 years, covering local government and healthcare, and at alternative news weekly Jackson Free Press for 1 year. She has received state and national recognition for her stories on hunger, debtors' prisons, and medical billing, including the February 2020 Sydney Award and the Bill Miner Prize for Investigative Reporting in 2018 and 2019.
My name is Anna Wolfe. I'm an investigative reporter with Mississippi Today, which is an online nonprofit news organization founded in 2016. I am really happy to be doing this event. I graduated from Mississippi State in 2014, came up through the communications department, and I don't think there was anything quite like this at the time, so I'm really honored to participate. I graduated in 2014 and sort of got into the industry by working for the Jackson Free Press, which is the alternative news weekly here in Jackson, and I've been in Jackson ever since. I worked for the Clarion Ledger after that for 3 years. I've covered a lot of different topics, healthcare for the Clarion Ledger, and now I'm working on poverty specifically, which is great because before I took over this beat in 2018, there really wasn't a reporter dedicated to poverty in the state of Mississippi. And with poverty being such a huge issue here, it's really crucial. I think my mission is to really find people who have been left out of the conversation so often, especially with regards to state policy, and kind of bring them in and not rely on these typical narratives about people living in poverty, but actually talking to them and letting them tell their stories. I think storytelling is such an important tool to tackling poverty, right? Like letting people tell their stories and learning from them what they need and how they might be impacted by decisions made by our government. So back in October of 2018, I got a call from a longtime source who wanted to tell me about a story. Actually, he messaged me on Facebook, and I called him, and he wanted to tell me about his friend Dixie, who was currently incarcerated in a MDOC, Mississippi Department of Corrections facility called a restitution center. But she was also an employee for McDonald's. So correctional officers were driving her every day to her job at McDonald's while she was also being incarcerated. And he was just kind of worried that the state wasn't recording her earnings properly and that she might not be getting the items that he was sending her while she was in jail. But when he told me that she was working at McDonald's, I had to stop him. I said, wait, a prisoner of the state is working at McDonald's. And I had to pull my colleague, Michelle, our justice reporter at the time, aside and say, did you know about this? Is this a practice you're familiar with? And she said no, and so we started going to McDonald's frequently. I didn't tell my editor about it. We kind of like snuck away to McDonald's a few times a week, trying to find these inmates who are working at McDonald's and other fast food restaurants in the metro area. And eventually we found Dixie, and that was kind of the start to the storytelling, trying to kind of pull information from her about her experience and get some color to really explain what her situation was and what her experience was in both the jail and as a sort of incarcerated person working at a fast food restaurant.
Like, we expect you to hold this job down and do all this stuff, but yet we're gonna make you late for work almost every day. Like, I mean, just crazy stuff, like crazy.
What do you mean by that? Like, what is the transportation situation like?
Oh, that's fun. Okay. Like, for example, this morning I was supposed to be here at 10, and I got up at 6:30. Now, every morning's different, though. Every morning's different. You sign out each day for the next day, so they can kind of put together their little plan. And each guard's different, so it depends who's driving. But, I mean, I'm late at least once a week. At least once a week. Like, how are you, like, to me that's crazy. But at the same time, I understand, like, how can you get this many girls ready for work And, you know, we have one mirror and 8 girls. You can only imagine. And we all have to get up around the same time. And, you know, that's not pretty in the morning. Yeah. We got one girl, like, ducked down, trying to brush her teeth, and the other one's standing on her tiptoes, and she's doing her makeup. It's crazy. But, yeah.
So Dixie was kind of, she was a funny character, and she found a lot of humor in the situation she was dealing with. But she also expressed a lot of frustration with the program, and I think, you know, that was significant when we're trying to hold officials accountable for these programs. This was another anecdote.
Like, since my husband died, I went straight to rehab. I've been trying to live right. Like, I've changed a lot of what I really have been, but it's like this keeps biting me in the butt no matter what. Like, it's been, I mean, I've lost everything in this such short period of time, and I'm still, like, trying my damnedest to get it back. You know what I mean? And it's like, no matter how hard you try, it's like there's still, like, just, I feel like one of them little gopher things that, you know, with the, they get you. Yeah, like, I keep trying here, and they're like, ah. Do you have any idea?
So my colleague and I were kind of just sneaking off to McDonald's to get this story. We weren't really telling anyone what we were doing, which I think is a good practice for reporters when they're just starting out on a story. But I think also what we were doing that was significant is we were really questioning the status quo here. You know, really saying, is this normal? We weren't taking for granted that what we were witnessing, that was you know, the situation with these workers or inmates, that it was normal or okay, right? It wasn't the first time that reporters had ever written about the restitution centers before. It was just the first time that reporters were being really critical about what was actually going on. So even right before we published our report in January of 2020, a news station actually published their own report about the same McDonald's and a hiring manager at that McDonald's hiring former inmates. And so, you know, while that story was being publicized, you know, we kind of had to take a closer look at what was actually happening. And I think that's what really propelled the reporting and propelled the story. So after we started finding people, I think we had to take a look at the bigger picture and really get some facts about this center that might not otherwise be available. So we started figuring out who was in the center at a specific point in time, and we started gathering court documents to be able to say how long people were spending in the centers, how much money they owed, and these were things that, you know, wouldn't have, that information was not publicly available otherwise. So we actually created our own database to be able to get these really good facts and startling facts, right, that I think drove the story. So we found out that the people were spending up to 5 years in the prison, but on average 4 months, and they owed an average of $3,500. But some owed as little as $600 and were being jailed for their debts. Asking these questions, such as how long people are spending in the jails or how much they owed, getting those answers is one way that you know you have a good story. But sometimes people will let you know that you have a good story during your reporting. So one of the things we did while we were reporting the story is we traveled to Greenwood to go to the Greenwood Restitution Center, where people were doing sort of more manual labor, whereas the inmates in the metro area were working at fast food restaurants. Those in the Delta were working as like farm hands for people in the area, or working at a deer meat processing facility. And so while we were there, we tried to link up with one of the employers named KK, and I was talking to her in my car while we were up there, and this was the interaction that we had.
Honey, I'm not going to get into this. Let me call the lieutenant, and I'm going to talk to him, and I'll call you back.
Okay, well, is there any chance, we're just up here for the day, hanging out. Is there any chance that we could meet up with you, maybe?
Have you talked to the lady in Jackson that's over the restitution center?
Well, so like I said, we have to go through public relations every time that we try to get any information from MDOC. So, like...
Yeah, well, why did y'all decide to do a story on the restitution centers?
Well, when
Can I give you a heads up or notify you?
Well, sort of. I mean, we started just with the restitution center in Flowood, just talking to people, you know, because, I mean, to be frank, like, we were just interested in the concept because it's never really been written about before. And, like, the general public probably doesn't know that, you know, that McDonald's is, like, employing MDOC, you know, prisoners, right? So we were just interested in, like...
You're gonna print that?
Yeah?
You're gonna print that?
Well, what do you mean?
You're gonna kill their business.
Kill whose business?
McDonald's.
Oh. No, we talked to the owner and everything.
And he said the owner of McDonald's admitted that he's using restitution workers?
Yeah, of course.
Wow.
Why?
Okay. Let me holler at the lieutenant. I'll bring you back.
Okay, I'll look forward to it.
She got weird. Bring that to right there, man.
So once we knew we had a story, we had to find a main character. And we talked to a lot of people who had gone through the restitution centers over the last several years. We found people on Facebook. We found people through looking at lists of current and former probationers. And we found Anita Husband, who was working at a payday loan store several years ago when, during one of her shifts, she saw her car being repossessed. And she panicked, and her coworker suggested maybe she just write a few fake checks to get some money to get her car back. That escalated, and she ended up embezzling over $10,000 from this payday lending store. She wasn't given prison time, she was given probation, and she got picked up and ended up in the restitution center. But she wouldn't be there very long. She ended up running away and eventually wound up in prison. We thought that her story was great because of the irony of her having worked for a payday lending store, which is notoriously predatory against people living in poverty, and they were also paying her $9 an hour, so she wasn't really making it very well. She was working at a Church's Chicken in Jackson when she was at the restitution center. She was living in Biloxi, that's where she's from, but when she got picked up by the police, she was sent to the restitution center in Flowood, so far away from home. And so I went to go visit the Church's Chicken where she worked to get some color for the story. And as I was driving there, I noticed that the gas station on the corner of the intersection where the Church's Chicken was called Freedom Corner. And then I looked around and I said, wait, this is Freedom Corner, the civil rights monument for the intersection of Martin Luther King Drive and Medgar Evers Boulevard. And I just thought that irony was just like the icing on the cake for a story like this. That kind of color is really good for storytelling, but I'm often less interested in sort of flowery language about your surroundings and what the scene looks like than I am in the people that drive the story. And so, people are contradictory, they're messy, but we can't shy away from those contradictions when we're telling people's stories. So I like to try to focus on people's motives, try to understand why they're making the decisions that they are. Even if those decisions don't make sense to you, usually people are making decisions that make the most sense in their lives. And rarely there are rarely poster children for these different issues that we're covering, like the perfect inmate who didn't do anything wrong. But it's not really your job to make an argument or make a point when you're telling someone's story, but it is your job to be compassionate and tell their story with empathy. I wanted to share the story of Lillian Cason, who I interviewed for a story about eviction back over the summer. This is what she said.
We are the community. We the ones that's keeping this stuff going. So why would you want to mistreat the ones that's trying to get out there and do something, and then when something tragic happens, y'all use that situation to break them down even more? Hey, what I'm sleeping in every day. Look at what I'm sleeping in every day.
So I hope it's helpful to see some of the background or the behind the scenes on reporting a story like this. I think just making sure to always question the status quo, finding some irony, some color, but most importantly, making your characters relatable and really leaning into those contradictions is the way to tell a good story.
No matter how many people out there try to say you messy, you don't know what you're talking about, that ain't right. The good Lord gave you the knowledge and the voice and the strength to help the ones that need to be helped. And that man didn't call my phone by accident. If I was in the wrong, we wouldn't be talking that.
Right.
And that's just what it is. So the good Lord see that I went through enough.
Yeah.
So now it's my time.
Yeah.
It's time for me to be heard. And he put you here to make sure that people like me are being heard.
Mhm. Thank you for saying that, Lillian.
You welcome back, because that's what the good Lord left my spirit to tell you.
Yeah.
He laid that on my spirit to tell you just then. Because he knows you're a little frustrated right now. So he told me to tell you everything is going to come to pass.
Thank you, Lillian.